Holy crap! I knew the Deck Gang wielded great power, but I didn't realize the full extent of what we were capable of. I didn't expect this feature to come, especially not so soon, but it's here, per game performance profiles. Let's get into it. What's good, Deck Gang? It's been a little longer than usual since my last video. I wasn't feeling too great and my productivity just wasn't there. That said, I've been working on not just one, but two really fun videos for y'all, and then Valve dumps this news on us. Valve was tired of me sitting on my ass and told me it's time to get back on the saddle, so here we go, and it's a big one. Ever since before launch, Steam Deck enthusiasts have been talking about the need for per-game performance profiles, even shareable ones, and I just didn't see this being on Valve's radar. Despite how awesome Steam Input is, this didn't seem like something that Valve was interested in. But the number one thing I've learned about covering Valve is that it's impossible for me to know what they're actually thinking. The broad strokes? Sure, but when we get to the finer details, Valve has consistently been able to surprise me, and that brings us to today's update. Despite staying at version 3.2 rather than incrementing to 3.3, this is yet another big update with numerous features, including some hints towards the future of docking on Steam Deck. But first and foremost, of course, are the words you're going to get tired of hearing me say by the end of this video. Per game performance profiles. So how does it work? Right now, it's completely opt-in. When you first fire up a game, it retains whatever your sort of global settings are. Valve refers to this as your default profile. You can go to the advanced performance settings and flip the toggle to use a per game profile. In this case, I'm playing Sekiro, and you can see it now update to say that I'm using the Sekiro profile. So I'm going to set the FPS limit to 30, TDP limit to 14, and for testing purposes, I'll set the FSR sharpness to 4. As Valve says, any edits will be saved and automatically applied when the game is launched. If I close the game, the performance profile will be reverted back to default, and if I reopen this game, it will swap back to the Sekiro profile as long as that's the last thing I was using for this game. It works for any setting in this tab, so frame rate limit, refresh rate, half rate shading, TDP limit, manual GPU clock control, and FSR settings. That said, I did find a reproducible bug where the frame rate limit did not stick. It was kind of a specific set of steps that I took to get to that bug, so I won't bore you with the details. I've reported it to Valve and I imagine they'll have it buttoned up soon enough. In any case, this is a huge feature that everyone was waiting for, and it mostly works as everyone expected. One thing people mentioned a lot when talking about performance profiles is the ability to share them, and that is certainly not here yet. But imagine the ability to name a profile, share it with the community, and have them upvote just like Steam Input profiles. That would be neat. That might also necessitate the ability to save multiple performance profiles per game, so maybe you'd have something like low power for long battery life and high power for when you're plugged into the wall. I can certainly see that happening, but it also kind of brings me to why I didn't expect these performance profiles to happen in the first place. When we're talking about these theoretical use case specific settings, it requires in-game setting changes to be made too. For example, if I'm playing God of War for longer sessions, I'm going to want to leverage something like FSR performance, but if I'm playing plugged into the wall, I'd use FSR quality. So in a way, Steam Deck performance profiles are just one side of that equation. I'm going to be very curious to see how Valve decides to enhance this feature in the future. So what else is new in this update? Well, there are a bunch of small things. The hardware survey is now part of the Steam Deck, so the May survey, which gets published next month, should give us some key information on how many Steam Decks are out there. There are some small but useful bug fixes, stuff like multiple new inventory notifications, users showing up as your favorites when they're no longer friends. That's a funny one. Can you imagine removing someone from your friends list only to find them in your favorites? No thanks. Offline mode, remote play, and keyboards also have some small fixes and improvements, and some controller related stuff got moved around in the quick access menu. But it's the first bullet point in the patch notes that give us a hint of things to come. It reads, quote, when connected to an external display, Steam Deck interface is now scaled to virtual 1280 by 800 resolution. More work on this feature and functionality is underway. So I tested this out, and as promised, all of the Steam Deck UI is now rendered at 800p. This is in contrast to rendering the Steam Deck UI at the native resolution of the external display, which was annoying for a few reasons. Most notably, it meant that you couldn't do direct capture of 800p menus without some weird finagling. Now you can capture the menus at 800p by default, so that's awesome. I also just think the menus look better this way on the big screen. By the way, they did say virtual 800p, and that's important to note. This does not change the signal that is sent to the display. For example, I have a 4K TV, and when I dock it to that display, the output signal is still 4K, even though the menus and games are rendered at 800p and scaled up. Unfortunately, my dock only has bandwidth for 4K at 30 FPS, so it means that whenever I dock my deck to that TV, I'm forced to play at 30 FPS or lower. It would be nice if we're just able to select the resolution, which actually brings me to another update in the works. Someone on Twitter named Michelle asked Pierre-Loup from Valve if they were going to add more selectable resolutions, and Pierre-Loup replied that yes, that is on the list. So between that and the hint in the patch notes that more work on this functionality is underway, I think we're starting to see some of the dock related software updates. They're aiming to release the dock in the next month or two, so I'm really looking forward to that, since I really want this to feel like the hybrid it's meant to be. When I think about the Switch, it's not just about being handheld. I mean, it's in the name, right? It's about the ability to seamlessly switch between handheld and docked. I'm really anxious to see that sort of functionality come to the Steam Deck, and it seems like that's on the way. So that's everything for this update. Next, let's talk about Fortnite. This is a bit of old news by now, but strictly speaking, there have been a number of ways to play Fortnite on Steam Deck. You could install Windows and get it to run there, or you could use GeForce Now to play Fortnite in the cloud. Well, last week's news brought a new cloud-based option for playing Fortnite, the Xbox Cloud. The best part about it compared to GeForce Now option is that it's completely free. You don't need Game Pass, you just need a Microsoft account to play Fortnite on Xbox Cloud. I used the Edge browser that I had installed and configured back when xCloud was first announced as compatible for Steam Deck. You could use Chrome and Gaming on Linux as a nice short tutorial for that. I played a couple of games and there must have been some serious lag because I didn't get a chicken dinner. Now, jokes aside, it played fine. There was noticeable latency as you'd expect for cloud gaming, but it was very playable. Basically, if you get a hankering for Fortnite, this is a super convenient and free option. I can't be mad at that. More interestingly though, I think this sort of solidifies Epic's interest. Before the Steam Deck launch, Tim Sweeney publicly said that he basically has no interest in supporting Fortnite on Linux and kind of undermined Valve's efforts to get big games on Steam Deck by implying that he doesn't believe in the efficacy of his own anti-cheat on Linux. That was weird to everyone for a number of reasons, but what I was left wondering was what exactly were Tim's plans to get Fortnite into the hands of more players. He can't rule out Steam Deck being a major platform, and Epic have already played their hand in the mobile phone landscape. And I kind of refuse to believe that Epic doesn't have a plan for all of that. And so it seems that their plan dovetails very well with Microsoft's own plan. While Microsoft has been keen on supporting the Steam Deck, they have yet to integrate Game Pass with the Steam Store in a way that would allow users to use their subscription to natively install games like Forza and Gears on their PC from the Steam Store. Microsoft would much rather you use their cloud gaming option than give up 30% of their subscription fees. Similarly, Epic has adamantly refused to give up a significant percentage to a store fee. That brings us to this place now where Epic and Microsoft are partnering, but it leaves me wondering, is there more to this partnership? Is there quid pro quo? Given Epic's well-known stance, I assume that Microsoft is not getting any cut from Fortnite microtransactions. Could Epic be attempting to woo Microsoft onto their own platform? Would Epic forego their own cut entirely to get Game Pass on Epic Game Store, and would anyone use that over the native Microsoft launcher? What do you think? Alright, before I leave, I want to touch on 3 new releases and how they play on Steam Deck. First up is Rogue Legacy 2, which just left early access and launched its 1.0 version. I have mixed memories of the original game. I enjoyed it and played to completion, but I remember being a bit turned off by the meta progression system that allowed you to carry over upgrades into subsequent playthroughs. It felt like this took away from it being a roguelike, But since then, a lot of roguelikes have chosen to adopt something like this, and I've gotten a lot more amenable to it. That's good because I hate to imagine a world where I didn't give Rogue Legacy 2 a try. It's up there with Hades and Spelunky as must-try roguelikes. It has such good mechanical depth and game feel, and is just so incredibly polished. The mechanical depth I mentioned can be a bit daunting, but it's also what keeps you coming back for more. Different classes feel like different games. And for what it's worth, this game has actually been deck verified since before the deck launched, and yeah, that's exactly what I experienced. By default, the battery will last 5 hours or so playing this game, and you can probably even stretch it further. Loot River is the game that bills itself with Tetris meets Souls gameplay, and I mean, yeah, kinda. It can be a bit on the challenging side, but it actually feels a lot more like Diablo. I mean that in a good way. It gets mixed reviews, and most of the negative reviews have some reasonable complaints. Some of the animations are kind of janky, some of the combat is repetitive, and the loot becomes a little underwhelming after many hours of play. But that's just it. I didn't want to put this game down. I played many hours with the combat and loot becoming repetitive, but the core loot staying very compelling to me personally. To that end, there were some complaints I just didn't get at all. There was a lot of talk about how difficult it is to parry, and that wasn't my experience. After a couple of hours, I was parrying like a pro, and even chose to keep loot that complemented that style. I had one relic that healed me when I parried, and another that guaranteed a crit after a parry. That combo allowed me to go full tilt on offense and even bank some potions with the alchemist who promised to double whatever I gave him. Anyway, this game is deck verified, and that once again matched my experience. I was able to get a little over 3 hours at default settings on this one. Citizen Sleeper is another fantastic game that's not going to appeal to everyone. It's heavy on narrative, and somewhere between a point-and-click adventure and an RPG. I've seen it described as a sci-fi Disco Elysium, and that really hits the nail on the head. It's well written, and like any good sci-fi narrative, the tropes are used effectively as a criticism of late-stage capitalism. The tabletop scheme gives you a sense of freedom in determining where you want to allocate your best outcomes, and where you're more willing to accept the risk of a bad outcome. This is a really thoughtful and well-made game that plays great on deck. Well worth your time if you dig narrative adventures. And that's going to do it for today's news roundup. Let me know in the comments what you think of this long requested feature finally being available. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and maybe check out my Patreon. Deck Gang out. Goodbye!